Welcome to The Conspiracy Show. My name is Richard Syrett. Princess Diana of Wales, perhaps the most beloved member of the British royal family. She captivated the world with her beauty and her charitable works on behalf of children's hospitals and her campaign to ban landmines. But for many, her tragic death, along with boyfriend Dodi Al Fayed in August of 1997, remains a mystery, perhaps even a conspiracy. Were Diana, the people's princess, and Dodi Fayed the victims of a mere car accident? Or was there something more sinister at play? Tonight, we'll meet an investigative journalist who believes that Lady Diana and Dodi Al Fayed were in fact targeted for assassination. I'll speak with a retired detective from Scotland Yard who continues to investigate the deaths of Diana and Dodi Fayed on behalf of his former boss, Mohammed Al Fayed. And a London-based television producer and author and widely recognized expert on the Paris crash who contends that Diana and Dodi's deaths were the result of an avoidable accident, a deadly combination of speed, booze, and a series of bad decisions. Me? I just want the truth, and I'm willing to follow it wherever it may lead. It is time to redefine reality. Genetic enigma or a human alien hybrid?
There was at least
That's
two
how
gunmen,
cynical I
one
am
was
now about the
firing from the
process.
nose.
Is it possible technology can alter weather patterns
created by
They're
the
going to make it? It has been engineered by the Illuminati.
There's no doubt.
Jeffrey Steinberg is the Foreign Intelligence Director with Executive Intelligence Review. Jeffrey, welcome to The Conspiracy Show.
Thank you.
Jeffrey, give me a timeline from the moment that Lady Diana, Dodi Fayed, left the Ritz-Carlton and headed towards the tunnel and then the eventual accident.
They decided, against the advice of Mohammed Al Fayed, to basically make a run for it out the back exit of the hotel because there were large number of paparazzi and some other unknown suspected MI6 people waiting in the crowds outside the front of the hotel. And what you had was a high-speed chase that ended in the crash in the tunnel.
One of the contentious issues has to do with the driver, Henri Paul, and his blood alcohol level. He was described in the British tabloids, even before the autopsy, as being drunk as a pig. Rather odd for them to make that assumption. Was Henri Paul a drunkard?
No.
What about Henri Paul's drinking? Was he in fact an alcoholic?
No. The allegation that Henri Paul was 3 times over the drink-drive limit was made before his body samples had even been analysed. This was pathetic. It was a botched post-mortem, if you like. We then asked for an independent post-mortem examination, which in any other country you would have, and that was bluntly refused by the French.
The same blood test that claimed to show that his alcohol levels were 3 times the maximum allowed showed a near-lethal dose of carbon monoxide in his blood.
It wasn't until they published findings of carbon monoxide in Henri Paul's blood that we got further scientists involved in this. And they said if Henri Paul had had that amount of carbon monoxide in his blood, he wouldn't be able to stand, let alone drive a car.
He would have been unable to stand up. He would have been in excruciating pain. He would have been dizzy. He would have been incapable of walking on his own. If you're going to claim that that blood sample shows that he was drunk, then you have to say that the same blood sample shows that he was near death from carbon monoxide poisoning and could not have even made his way to the car.
I mean, why would Henri Paul have such a high carbon monoxide reading in his blood? But more concerning is that there was found in his blood samples a medicine given to people who had tapeworm, which would be consistent with the fact that they'd been muddled up with a tramp.
A drunk who fell asleep above one of the subway grids in Paris. Somebody who had basically died of carbon monoxide poisoning. So Whether it was by accident or by intent, there's very good reason to say that that blood sample was not of Henri Paul, or if it was of Henri Paul, it was badly doctored.
When he topped himself, this led to all sorts of conspiracy theories that he was done away by the intelligence service. They had to get rid of him. He was in the tunnel. He's the key to the whole thing. Well, it's all complete nonsense.
What about the reports, eyewitness reports, of a flash of light in the tunnel, perhaps some sort of handheld laser device used to blind the driver, Henri Paul?
The reports of that are highly credible.
Numerous eyewitnesses say there was a flash in the tunnel. There is no doubt about that. And there was certainly a white Uno in the tunnel.
Now, there were eyewitnesses along the route, including an off-duty French police officer who spotted the white Fiat, the infamous missing white Fiat.
There were a number of witnesses at the time who were not interviewed by the French police.
They'd been interviewed by newspapers, and their statements had been published by newspapers, but they were never routinely interviewed. So the original investigation was never done properly in Paris, in my opinion.
Well, the inquest for Dodi and Diana was comprehensive. It was reported towards the end of the inquest that more words had been spoken at the inquest than are written in the Holy Bible. There were hundreds of witnesses, and it went on for nearly 6 months.
But half those witnesses were never called to the inquest here. Half of them were never, their evidence, some of them haven't even been interviewed.
What we do know from the inquest verdict was that Diana perished as a result of a drunken driver driving too fast while being pursued by the paparazzi.
No, I don't think it was. I certainly don't think it was. I really don't think it was an adequate inquiry.
And again, the role of the mysterious white Fiat Uno in the tunnel was to do what?
The Fiat was at the entrance to the tunnel, and with the Mercedes driving at about 55 miles an hour, all you would have to do is sort of nick it at an angle.
Only a glancing blow, but enough to drive the Mercedes completely off course and to collide with the 13th pillar in the armored tunnel.
There is zero evidence to suggest it forced the Mercedes anywhere.
The Fiat sped off out of the tunnel, disappeared from the face of the earth. There was strong evidence that surfaced after the crash, largely through the diligent efforts of the private investigation financed by Mohammed Al Fayed.
The white Fiat Uno was eventually identified, in fact, by us rather than the French police.
We know that from forensic tests that were done by the French.
It was driven by a man named James Anderson.
A chap called Anderson, a French photographer.
Was he connected with MI5 or MI6?
There are a lot of indications that would suggest that.
He pursued Dodi and Diana throughout the Mediterranean. He was obsessed with them.
He travelled all over the place, and indeed he had, we believe, photographed Diana and Dodi at one stage in the south of France, and he was keen on them.
Anderson, we believe, was driving that white Fiat Uno. He also had links to the security services.
Now, he was interviewed by the French police, and yes, he did have a white Fiat Uno. This was a fact, and they found it. The white Fiat was found. However, there was a problem. It was on bricks. It hadn't been anywhere for about a year.
Anderson was found in the south of France in a remote area in his car, which was burnt out. They said that it was suicide.
When he topped himself, this led to all sorts of conspiracy theories that he was done away by the intelligence service. They had to get rid of him. He was in the tunnel. He's the key to the whole thing. Well, it's all complete nonsense.
Anyway, it was always accepted by the French and the inquest that this was a suicide.
The same day that he was being found dead, there was a break-in to the photographic service that he worked for, it was a very professional break-in, probably done by British or French police. The relationships are complex, but they're very, very deep between the paparazzi and the police and intelligence services.
But are you suggesting that Anderson, at the wheel of this white Fiat Uno, was then responsible for causing the car crash? Therefore, Anderson was, in effect, the assassin?
It may very well be the case.
The doubters say that that might have been a very good opportunity to give her an abortion, and that she might have actually arrived at the hospital already having had an abortion.
There are reports, I believe first reported in EIR by yourself,
Right.
that there was a physician who happened on the scene, discovered Lady Diana in the back of the Mercedes,
Right.
quite conscious, quite alert. What more can you tell me?
The emergency doctor immediately diagnosed her as suffering from internal bleeding. When you believe that you've got someone still alive who's bleeding internally, I don't care if you're in Paris, France, or on the moon, there's only one thing you do. And you scoop them up and you get them into surgery as fast as possible. You cut them open and you find out where the bleeding is and you stop it.
It took them about an hour to get to the hospital.
Yeah, well, they didn't leave the scene, I don't think, for an hour while they treated her, and then it took almost an hour again to get to the hospital. They went past one hospital that some people believe could have treated her.
Well, they had to take her to the hospital that had the facilities to deal with a crash victim in her situation. And the other reason they stopped was because she had a heart attack as they were going to the hospital. And so therefore they had to save her life.
The explanation that I've been given was that in France they do things a little differently. And when it was required to perform some delicate procedure, perhaps to stabilize Lady Di, they actually pulled over to perform that procedure. Does that make sense to you?
Not at all. Number one, there was a military hospital with the best trauma facility in the city, much closer to the scene of the crash than the hospital that she was brought to. She should have been immediately medevaced into that hospital. She could have been in surgery within 15 minutes after the first emergency people arriving.
The ambulance attendant reportedly testified that the ambulance was ordered to slow down and at one point stop in order to perform some delicate procedure on Diana. What can you tell me about that? It sounds rather strange.
Well, they say it was... There are some very, very extreme rumours about that, actually. The doubters say that that might have been a very good opportunity to give her an abortion, and that she might have actually arrived at the hospital already having had an abortion.
Was Diana pregnant? Answer, no. How do we know she wasn't pregnant? We know from her autopsy, which was conducted less than 24 hours after her passing, that she was not pregnant.
There are some question marks over how that autopsy was conducted and whether, yet again, things were done in a not absolutely correct way.
The fact that she was embalmed before leaving Paris, is that not highly irregular?
No. The explanation given, which I personally can believe easily, was that the French wanted to make her body look respectable when her sister and her husband, Prince Charles, or former husband, came to visit her. So it was done for presentational purposes. It was not fully embalmed, it was partially embalmed, so the corpse itself looked reasonable for this very sensitive visit.
There were certainly people there who were members of the royal household, and there may well have been pressure being put on, you see, already, to produce a picture of events that wasn't entirely accurate.
Is it probable that she was pregnant?
I think Diana might have been tipped into doing anything to annoy the royal family at that stage. And I do think she was in love with Dodi, yes.
Mr. Al Fayed's quite adamant about all of this. He had lengthy conversations with Dodi and Diana whilst they were at the Ritz. They had champagne on ice, the bottle was standing by, Dodi had an engagement ring there that he intended to give to Diana.
And she said about the ring, well, he's going to give me a ring of some sort, but it's going on the fourth finger of my right hand, i.e. I am not going to marry Dodi Fayed.
Yet there is an engagement ring sitting in Harrods. What is that?
The engagement ring, the ring is called an engagement ring. A few things you need to know about that. One is that Dodi himself did not select it. Secondly, Diana never saw it. And thirdly, Mohammed Fayed bought it after they were dead. Now, if that makes an engagement ring to you, maybe it doesn't make one to me. I mean, that's a complete myth.
She gave him, significantly, her father's cufflinks and wrote him a note, which has been published since, saying, "These are my dearest possession," or words to this effect. "These are more important to me than anything else, and therefore I want to give them to you." Well, you would hardly do that to a man you didn't love.
I dismissed that. Not that I know whether or not she was pregnant or not, but my view is that one of the aspects of the cover-up here was to turn it into soap opera. Prince Philip made it known that he was out to get her. And it's not the kind of thing where Prince Philip had to even come out and call in the head of MI6 and say, "I want her whacked."
That chap who's an absolute disgrace to manhood.
Kensington Palace, the former residence of the late Lady Diana, Princess of Wales. We're here to investigate whether she was the victim of a car crash or perhaps murder most foul.
The plan was for Diana to have an accident. We want to break up this relationship with this boyfriend. We want to make Diana look foolish. We want to give her a warning. Those were the words I was to. We want to give her a warning. You know, broken arm, that kind of thing. And that all went horribly wrong.
What we're really dealing with here is classic high British politics. She basically tore the Windsors apart. She talked about her former husband, her in-laws, and she basically painted a picture of a dysfunctional family that had no qualifications to be on the English throne.
I think that Diana was very angry at the time. She'd had her HRH title removed.
I mean, absolutely disgraceful. They said, "Oh, she's no longer a member of the royal family," that's it. I mean, that was just real bitchiness on behalf of the royal family. And I suspected the person responsible was Prince Philip. That chap who's an absolute disgrace to manhood.
Prince Philip made it known that he was out to get her. And it's not the kind of thing where Prince Philip had to even come out and call in the head of MI6 and say, "I want her whacked."
Let's talk about the letter in which Diana confessed that she was frightened that her brakes were going to be fixed. What do you make of that letter?
Previously, she'd had reliable information, according to her, that her husband was planning to have her killed in a staged car accident.
Something must be done. And before you know it, an operation is structured to take care of it and to make it appear an accident. She, in fact, told one of her friends in a letter a year or so beforehand that she was sure that her in-laws were going to have her killed and it would likely be tampering with her car.
And her fears were such that she summoned her lawyer, Lord Mishcon, to Kensington Palace, just around the corner here, and she told him exactly what she believed would happen, what she'd been told would happen. In fact, what did in fact happen eventually, that she would be killed in a staged car accident.
On her last journey, Diana left from a Fayed hotel, travelling towards a Fayed apartment. she was travelling in a Fayed car being driven by a Fayed driver.
The official inquiry into the deaths of Princess Diana and Dodi Fayed concluded that the pair were killed as a result of the grossly negligent driving of chauffeur Henri Paul and the reckless pursuit of the paparazzi. But for me, many questions remain. Why did Henri Paul's behavior prior to the accident significantly differ from the published intoxication results? And why was that legal document proving Princess Diana feared there was a plot to kill her in a car crash kept secret for 6 years by Britain's most senior police officers? According to MI5 agent David Shaler, vehicle accidents are used as a method of assassination precisely because they're such a common cause of death. It's easier for authorities to claim that anyone crying foul is simply a conspiracy theorist. In this case, I think it's quite possible that someone within British intelligence, possibly acting with the tacit approval of a member of the royal family, caused the accident to merely scare the princess, to send a message. The plot then turned out to be far more successful than previously intended. And now, I'd like to know what you think. You can contact us here at The Conspiracy Show through our website, www.theconspiracyshow.com.